Good afternoon. Welcome. I should say we haven't even gotten to the 21st of March, which is supposed to be spring, but this may be the last day of spring because next week, welcome to 100 degrees. If you remember, I made some predictions way back when. I missed it because I thought the first 100-degree day would be January 1st, but we didn't make that. But we're getting closer each year, and it's still pretty nice out, but by next week, record highs. So welcome to our nice little air-conditioned studio here for our March 11th Tempe History Society lunch talks, which will continue through May. I also want to acknowledge the participation and support of Friendship Village. Mark Young had to retire early, and so Friendship Village will be getting a new marketing director. But for probably nearly a decade, they have been the sponsor for our lunch talks. And with that, let me run this famous little video that you can see the preview there. Go ahead.
Welcome to Friendship Village. Let me show you around. Wow. It's like a cruise ship on land. Do you like art? Music? Heated pool? Yoga? Pickleball? There are events and group outings for just about every interest.
The food.
There's so much to do here. Move it or lose it. Well, this is our stop.
Let's keep going. Yeah.
Lots going on at Friendship Village, an enormous amount of construction, and I believe should you decide you might want to move to Friendship Village, that it's, what, a 6-year waiting list? Is that right? 6 hours? 6 minutes? 6 something. How long is it?
180 people on the waiting list.
108, well, and how long will that take? Friendship Village continues to grow, to expand, and it is one of the most iconic places. Actually, if you move there, and those that are there will know it's just a neighborhood. Everybody seems to know everybody else, and so we are thrilled that Friendship Village continues to be a sponsor and that so many people do come from Friendship Village for our lunch talks. Today's lunch talk really is interesting. This is March, which is Women's History Month. That concerns me a little bit because I think there's some sexism involved. I don't know when Men's History Month is. And so I'm going to lobby for that. If we can have Women's History Month, we can certainly have Men's History Month. But that said, the number of women that have made contributions to Tempe over the years is manifest. And today's speaker is really one of those, Dr. Marin, who is also president of the Tempe History Society. And I went online, and I could read all of this, but that would take pretty much most of the time that we would allot to her. Suffice it to say that her time at ASU, she's a professor emeritus now, has been recognized. She was one of the founders of ASU's prestigious School of Trans-Border Studies, has made such a difference in the school's programming of Mexican and Latino history at the college. And that's important because some of these things are easy to overlook. So I'm not going to read all of that. You'll understand how knowledgeable she is and how dedicated she has been through her whole career in this particular field of study. But there is an interesting history over at ASU when it was the Tempe Normal School about one bilingual heroine who made really the normal school very famous. And that's the subject of her presentation. So please welcome Dr. Chris Marin.
Thank you, Vic. Happy Women's March is Happy Women's Month. Happy Women's Month. Feliz mes de la historia de la mujer. Happy Women's History Month. As we celebrate the Women's History Month, we're reminded that history is something we create and something that we not only should celebrate once a month, but all the time. So thank you, women. Each of you who are here have made your own contributions to your own family history, community history, maybe your own personal history in your own careers as educators, perhaps, or in other professions. So I acknowledge you, and I tribute as well, pay a tribute to you as well in terms of your own specialties and your own work as women in community. And it isn't just once a month, but all the time. So thank you very much for being here. I also want to say that historians like to talk about who, what, where, when, why. So I'm going to call those 5 W's occasionally. Who, what, where, when, why. Who are we talking about? What happened? When? Where? And the most important thing is why. The 5 W's are always very important, and you probably aren't aware that every time you read a newspaper article or a magazine article, right away in that first paragraph, you're going to right away see the who, what, where, when, why, the 5 W's. So that's what I'm going to do. Who am I going to speak about? My story begins with Grácia Liliana Fernández in 1900, and my story ends with Grácia Liliana Fernández in 1912. However, her story is one that is carrying a legacy that I also want to bring to your attention. Grácia Liliana Fernández. She could be considered a heroine, a pathbreaker, a women's historian, a bilingual scholar. She can be considered a teacher. She can be considered a community member. She was born in Sangerville, Maine, educated in the Sangerville Community Public School System as a high school graduate of Dexter High School. When she finished her education as a high school student, she became a bilingual teacher in the Dexter, Sangerville, Maine area, teaching English and Spanish in the high schools first, moved on to become a very well-known bilingual teacher in the higher education field, graduated from the University of Maine, 1898. She is very proficient bilingually. Her father is from Spain, Fernando Fernández. Her mother learned Spanish in the community in which she lived, Francine Gilman Fernández. She is a weaver of clothing and cloth, supervised also Spanish-speaking workers in the mill where she worked in Sangerville. She is also as important as her father, Fernando, because she became very proficient speaking Spanish, Castilian Spanish, the Castilian Spanish, which was spoken in Maine, along with French, German, and other languages, because many immigrants came and settled in that area of Maine. Grácia became a bilingual teacher right away after she obtained her degree in 1898 from the University of Maine. She then went on to be a specialist, a bilingual specialist of English and Spanish. She taught in Puerto Rico. She taught in Cuba. She taught in the Philippine Islands. Right away, her proficiency was valued because she was one of few women who was multilingual. She not only spoke Spanish, she not only spoke Castilian Spanish, but she spoke French, and she spoke German, and Spanish, Castilian Spanish, was her favorite language because that was her own home language. Father was always very proud of the fact that he and his wife were able to see how quickly Grácia learned the Spanish language, and she loved it her whole life. She dedicated her career and her life as a bilingual teacher. So while in Cuba and the Philippines, and also in Spain, she went to Spain, but she also did a lot of work in Puerto Rico that was a little difficult for her. She was hired by the U.S. Embassy to be a director of a bilingual program to teach Americans to come to Puerto Rico. She would hire American teachers who could teach English to the Spanish speakers in Puerto Rico because the United States by then had obtained parts of Puerto Rico as theirs. You remember the Spanish-American War. Puerto Rico needed English teachers to be able to come into the public schools to teach students English. So Grácia would bring in American teachers with college degrees to come to Puerto Rico, become involved as teachers in the elementary schools in Puerto Rico, where she was, to be able to teach the Spanish-speaking children English, which was a little ironic because she became a specialist in helping Spanish speakers elsewhere in Arizona learn English. So she did so well, but 1900, she graduated. She had finished her responsibilities in Puerto Rico and was looking for another position. I don't know how she learned of an important position that she was hired to do this work as a bilingual teacher in Apache County, Arizona. She comes to St. John's in Concho in 1900. School superintendents and school officials found her because by 1890, Concho, St. John's, El Tule, San Antonio, those communities in and around St. John's needed teachers who could teach English to the Spanish-speaking children in those schools. By 1890, Apache County, and especially the St. John's area, was heavily populated by persons who spoke Spanish. For example, the sheep herder families coming from New Mexico to St. John's and Concho and El Tule and also San Antonio, those Spanish-speaking communities. Also, Mexican farmers were coming into those areas to settle. More and more families came to that area because it was fertile and rich for development. The families who came taught their own children in Spanish, what we call the C's, or not the C's, excuse me, the R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They taught their children at home, or they sent their children to friends of families who taught the children, always in Spanish because that was their language. There were no speakers of Spanish in the public schools yet. And thank goodness the public school officials realized that they had a problem, because what was happening in Apache County was the need to bring in teachers who could teach English to the Spanish-speaking children who were dominating the schools, no matter where the Spanish-speaking children were taught. It became popular to deal with the overpopulation of Spanish-speaking children, to develop segregated schools for them in these areas. The idea and the practice was very common elsewhere. And the thought was, well, if we put these children all together, they all speak Spanish, maybe they'll learn English, because our teachers who are being taught Spanish speakers and English speakers together were having difficulties. Because these white Anglo teachers did not speak Spanish, nor did they understand Spanish, nor they couldn't communicate well with parents or families who were already demanding in Apache County Spanish-speaking teachers to teach English to their children. That same demand was being made throughout the territory, the Arizona territory. Apache County responded to that need right away. So 1900, Grácia Liliana Fernández comes in to St. John's. She brings her skills, her profession, her knowledge, her experience, her bilingualism to St. John's and Concho and El Tule and San Antonio. She comes in first. She comes to Holbrook by train. From Holbrook, she comes to St. John's. Anyone here from the St. John's area? No? Oh, I'm disappointed in that. Not really. She arrives on the stage that brings in the mail. It has already been popular through the Spanish language newspapers, El Observador, and also the St. John's Herald, that a new teacher is coming to St. John's area to teach English to the Spanish-speaking children in our public schools. So persons and families were waiting for Grácia Liliana Fernández to come up and come to work and get busy. Because of the demand being made very early by Spanish-speaking families to bring in teachers to teach English to their children. It was a common problem. Grácia comes in. It isn't known how she found out that there was a position available. She just took it. She was also always very adventurous. As a young girl, she traveled on her own with her father in Spain, and she became so well known for her proficiency in speaking Spanish at home, that you already know Spanish speakers is so quite different than the Spanish you speak in the public schools and what you learn in those public schools. When I was required as an ASU student to have a foreign language at certain hours, I chose Spanish as my class to be able to learn a foreign language, as they call the foreign language Spanish, a foreign language. Well, I didn't do well as a student. I wasn't speaking formal Spanish as it was being taught. I had no idea what was going on in that classroom. I couldn't conjugate. I didn't even know what that word meant. Conjugate Spanish, the teacher said. So I had to use my English-speaking dictionary to look up the word conjugate. Oh, tenses, present, past, taran, 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 taran. That was the rhythm that you spoke when you conjugated Spanish. Da-da, 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 da-da. I had no idea what that meant. My Spanish spoken in the home and at school and at my neighborhood. I come from Globe, Arizona, the famous copper mining town of the Arizona Territory. Globe, Arizona, where our Globe is the home of the first territorial governor, George W.P. Hunt, the home of the first female governor, Rose Mofford, the home of all of these copper miners and these immigrants coming from all over to mine copper, the Serbians, the Italians, the Mexicans, the Hispanics, or the Spaniards, and so many who came to mine copper. So I grew up in a mining town. Oh boy, and my legendary community, my neighborhood, the famous Euclid Avenue. So I am making history as a historian, as a woman, as a speaker, to make sure that you recognize the importance of Globe, Arizona, my hometown. Sports makes Globe thrive, even to this day. But there's more to Globe, because Globe also experienced segregated schools. Miami, Arizona, nearby, had the Bullion Plaza Elementary School, the Mexican school, they called it. Concho and El Tule in San Antonio, and also in St. John's, had Mexican schools for the Mexican children. The idea was so they could all learn English together. But Apache County Superintendent and other officials come into play. And I'm going to tell you about these men, but I'm going to talk about the men last, because I'm going to talk about the women and Grácia first. As I mentioned, I talk about her in my opening presentation. I talk about her as I finish my presentation. Grácia Liliana Fernández. She comes in and does very well. Apache County school officials are very progressive in wanting to solve what they have already been hearing used elsewhere throughout the territory, that there is a Mexican problem. What is the Mexican problem that comes into the Arizona territory early? Mexicans, meaning white teachers, Anglo teachers who are teaching Mexican-American children with Anglo children complain that the Mexican children are not doing well because we don't speak Spanish. As a result, our American and Anglo students are lagging behind in their education, teachers are saying, not only in St. John's, but elsewhere. So the Mexican problem is blamed on language because it's too early yet to recognize the importance of bilingualism that can solve this problem of the Mexican problem, language, Spanish, English. Apache County does very well because it has money, and it can bring in Spanish-speaking teachers who are also bilingual, but they don't become as popular and as progressive as Grácia Liliana Fernández. What Grácia does when she appears, she has already learned from her travels, from her experience, the importance of using the media and the newspapers to show off her skills. That leads to more money for her because she now becomes a proficient bilingual teacher earning money elsewhere throughout that area. Not only earning money in Apache County, in the schools of St. John's and Concho and elsewhere. So she visits as soon as she becomes settled. It isn't clear yet for me, where does she live? Because the students who are coming to the schools in St. John's are being taught in the homes of families. They call the rooms where they are being taught as schools. So yes, the children are being taught in St. John's and Concho and El Tule in San Antonio, Spanish-speaking children. Grácia comes, and she brings the children together with the help of families to develop a so-called school that is not going to be segregated in a sense that we talk about school segregation. Because she is so proficient as a bilingual teacher, as a bilingual speaker, as a bilingual woman, as a bilingual professional, and she is ready to brag about herself to the editor of the St. John's Herald, who promotes her. The second thing that Mr. Lemming is really fascinated by is her beauty. If you look at this picture of Grácia Liliana Fernández in 1911, taken from the normal school yearbook, El Picadillo, 1911, you see this woman, Grácia Liliana Fernández, and how beautiful she is. In that yearbook of 1911, she is the only faculty professor wearing cap and gown. But she learned how to exploit herself willingly, because what she is really doing is promoting bilingualism in a different way. So through articles in the St. John's Herald, the community is learning about this new arrival teacher who is bilingual and is coming to help solve our Mexican problem, and is coming to teach English to these Spanish-speaking children, because families are demanding and complaining, why isn't my child progressing in school? Why isn't my child learning English in school? Why isn't my child dropping out of school? Why is my child adding to the problem in the public schools because of absenteeism or truancy? School officials know that if they're keeping those records that are required according to truancy and dropouts, they're going to be losing money for educational purposes. So they want to solve that other problem that these Mexican students are causing: truancy, dropout, delinquency. The problem has usually been because the children are not speaking English. The other problem is because the Anglo students are lagging behind. Another problem for St. John's community to deal with. Why isn't my white child progressing as he should be or she should be and doing better? It's because these Mexican kids are keeping them from doing that. Because I have to pay more attention to them, says a teacher. Because I don't speak Spanish, says a teacher. I don't know how to deal with a problem. So you have everybody trying to solve the same problem: language. Proficiency in language. Grácia is doing very well publicly. Articles are written in the St. John's Herald about her. Her photograph is starting to appear. She comes to do interviews with the merchants at the offices of the St. John's Herald. More and more merchants and prominent businessmen and entrepreneurs and others involved in community building in Apache County are meeting her, speaking to her, learning from her, liking her, giving money to the schools to develop language classes. She does so well as a teacher, helping Spanish-speaking students learn English. And I have to tell you what she uses. Maybe some of you will be familiar with the techniques, and I'll tell you that in just a minute. She uses the McGuffey's Eclectic Primer. That sound familiar? You're from a different generation. I had to look it up too. The McGuffey's Eclectic Primer to teach Spanish-speaking children how to read in English. They learned how to pronounce words in English and how to write them in English, how to spell them in English, using this McGuffey's Eclectic Primer that was being used now in this period of time of early 1900 in the public schools of Apache County. Maricopa County was a little behind, but Apache County was progressive. The reason they were progressive is because they were not headed by Southern leaders who came from Southern states to travel north. It was because they had sheep herder families now coming in who knew what to do. Because the sheep herder families from New Mexico were bilingual. They spoke Spanish and they spoke English. These sheep herder families, who for generations had been coming from New Mexico to Apache County, following the sheep herder's trail. Occasionally, they would pass through Tempe. So we have the McGuffey's Eclectic Primer to teach Spanish-speaking children English. So as a result, school attendance increased. As a result, Spanish-speaking students progressed. As a result, families were pleased. As a result, the community got along a little bit better. The Spanish-speaking community getting along better with the Anglo community, because now you had their children doing well together So what the local school board officials did was promote the work of Grácia Liliana Fernández. They made her the principal of the school district in the St. John's, El Tule, San Antonio, Concho School District. She was principal now. She was earning $1,000 at that time in 1900. I don't know how much money that is today, but the average salary in Maricopa County in this period of time for teachers was $1,600. Male teachers, $1,800. Female teachers, $1,500. There was always this discrepancy and a difference in wages. Male teachers usually would earn more than female teachers in salary, even though the female teachers were as experienced. And of course, the rule, if you married, you had to quit teaching. So therefore, you had women hiding pregnancies, but always men tattletaling. There was a woman who didn't have a job. Now she could not earn a decent wage because she couldn't teach. But that's a different story. That didn't happen so much in Apache County. Apache County had progressive officials. There was one particular official that was really important, and I'm going to mention the names of the men that I'm going to be talking about, but as we move along, I will do that. But the male professor, the school superintendent of Apache County Schools was Mr. Alfred Reese, R-U-I-Z, Alfredo Reese. Originally from California, he came to become a merchant, an entrepreneur, a leader, a politician, an attorney, and he became involved in learning more about the educational issues in Apache County. He was already in the Concho area. He was already learning his responsibilities as a school superintendent for Apache County. He was attending the school institutes, teachers' institutes that were teachers being required to attend and to participate in. Grácia took advantage of the teachers' institutes wherever they occurred, whether it was in Apache County, Maricopa County. She traveled, she gave papers, she made speeches, she talked about bilingualism, she talked about linguistics. She was so good at speaking about her profession that heads started to turn. Who is that woman? Grácia Liliana Fernández. She's from St. John's. She's from Apache County. She's being noticed. She likes the attention because it calls attention to the importance of the Spanish language, to the importance of bilingualism. This idea, this profession had to grow into the mindset of families and persons in communities with money, white families as well. This idea of bilingualism had to be in their mindset to be able to progress on its own. Bilingualism as important. For too long, Spanish was not important. It was a bad language to speak, kept our children from progressing. Nobody understood what those kids are talking about. We can't teach because we don't speak Spanish, and so forth and so forth and so forth came the complaints of white families and white teachers. But Grácia was there to promote bilingualism, to speak Spanish to families. She used her bilingualism in the classroom to help students. And this was at the time also when the law, the Arizona territorial law, stated English only was to be used in American schools to teach. That came early, that law, English only law as we call it. She used that law, but she also exploited it in a different way in her classroom because she was bilingual. She could use English and Spanish to teach English to Spanish-speaking students because she was bilingual, she was bicultural, she spoke Spanish, she spoke Castilian Spanish, She could help the students do very well, and they liked that, the students. You ought to know when your kids used to talk about their favorite teacher, why she was their favorite, and that you were hoping that next year Miss Jones would be their teacher again in the 5th grade, because Miss Jones did great with the son or the daughter in the 4th grade, and so on and so on. So Grácia Liliana Fernández was the best teacher to teach English in the Apache County schools. She was noticed by Alfredo Reese, school superintendent, because he was attending teacher institutes, because he was meeting officials in Apache County and saying, you know what, I think we should bring in more teachers who are bilingual to deal with this Spanish language problem, to deal with this Mexican problem, to deal with these demands being made by Spanish-speaking families who are now able to vote, who are now able to be school trustees, who are now able to make decisions for their communities, who are now able to do important things for the development and the progressivism of Apache County, St. John's and Concho and so forth. So everybody now was benefiting in a different way because of Grácia Liliana Fernández and because of Alfredo Reese, school superintendent, and because of other officials now who were also attending school institutes, listening to Grácia Liliana Fernández talk about the issues in Apache County. So little by little, things were happening. Among the friends of Alfredo Reese were Mexican men of Tempe who belonged to the Alianza Hispanoamericana, founded in Tucson in 1894. The AHA, the Alianza Hispanoamericana, was selling insurance policies or death benefits because Mexicans were still considered poor insurance risks by companies that didn't want to sell insurance because they couldn't pay anything according to a debt. So the Alianza sells to its members death benefits, insurance benefits, burial benefits, health care, and so forth. So the Alianza Hispanoamericana was not only becoming like a Mason group, which it could have been, but it was also becoming a civil rights group, paying attention to the mistreatment of Mexicans in this early period after 1848 and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the takeover of land that belonged to Spain, belonged to Mexico. Little by little, the encroachment of whites coming west, little by little, the encroachments of whites coming into this area that we call the Arizona Territory, little by little, demanding Americanism. Now, that's the conqueror's point of view, of course. So we do have now the idea coming in from Alfredo Reese, being shared by the Alianza Hispanoamericana, by these men. Samuel Brown. Samuel Brown is very well known in Tempe. Oh, he's a hero. He comes to Tempe as a young man with his brother. He's originally a blacksmith. So when he comes to Tempe, he's befriended by Charles Trumbull Hayden, but also works for Charles Trumbull Hayden as a blacksmith. But he's a very good blacksmith. He opens up his own blacksmith shop, he and his brother. And he does very well, and because Samuel Brown is very bilingual, very well loved and respected now by the Mexican community of Tempe, going through its own racism in Tempe in this early period, he becomes a hero in a different way to both Anglo community and the Mexican community of Tempe because of his proficiency as a blacksmith, providing excellent services to families in Tempe, becoming very well known because he's bilingual and can deal with issues relating to merchants, schools, very well known politically as well because of his link to the Alianza Hispanoamericana, Samuel Brown. So Samuel Brown hears from Alfredo Reese about Grácia Liliana Fernández. His other friend is also bilingual, Dr. Charles Henry Jones, surgeon, practitioner of medicine. He practices in Tempe, Dr. Jones. He becomes fascinated with the Mexican families he treats, with the children he treats, with the elders he treats, with the Native Americans in Tempe that he treats, that aren't of such concern to other physicians, white physicians in Tempe, who do very well. But Dr. Charles H. Jones learns Spanish, and he is so fascinated with how the Mexicans have taught the Native Americans how to deal with and how to take care of with the plants, the desert life, the environment, the desert environment that the Mexican women teach the white women of Tempe how to use plants and how to use the limbs of trees and the boughs of trees and how to use the cacti and how to use the barrel cactus and how to extract what is being needed, because what Charles H. Jones learns from the Native American women, but the Mexican women especially, is how the Mexican women are now using the extracts of the desert plants as medical abilities to treat illness. They're now learning and teaching. Dr. Jones is learning from them, being fascinated with how the Mexican women are now going out into the desert and bringing plants back, bringing cacti back, bringing in the nopal, the cactus leaf, to be able to use something in those desert plants that can be used as a form of medicine to cure. This is Dr. Jones. He is now personal friends with Samuel Brown. He becomes, Dr. Jones, the secretary-treasurer of Lodge Number 5, the Alianza Hispano Lodge Number 5, founded by Samuel Brown in Tempe. So Samuel Brown, Alfredo Reese, Charles Jones, those three men, very proficient bilingually, especially Dr. Charles Jones, can't get enough. He wants to know for himself as a physician, what can I do to better treat my patients, to learn how to use what's coming from the nopal, from the cacti, from the desert plant, to be able to treat my patients. I may not be doing as well as I should be. Maybe I can do better. So the idea then comes to these three men as they talk to Alfredo Reese a little bit more. They meet often, and they meet often in St. John's. They meet often to talk about what the Alianza Hispanoamericana can do in St. John's and Concho and El Tule and San Antonio to better the lives of the Spanish speakers there. They've had difficulties with racism. They've had difficulties with school segregation. They've had difficulties because they speak Spanish. Grácia Liliana Fernández has been their key because of what Alfredo Reese has discovered or learned on his own by hearing her speak, by seeing her in the classroom, because he meets teachers in their classroom to be able to see how they teach. When he sees what Grácia is doing to help children learn English, he's proud of that. He is quite a man, this Alfredo Reese, on his own. So, not only is he a member of the Alianza Hispanoamericana, Alfredo Reese, he is also very interested in having and building and developing a lodge there. So these three men meet often. When they do meet, they learn about Grácia every time from Alfredo Reese, who is so well knowledgeable in his profession as an attorney, as a merchant. He had a saloon that he managed. He was a probate attorney. He was a well-known legal man in the community. So he provided services on the one hand as an attorney, and he provided services on the other as a school superintendent for Apache County. He was well-known, Alfredo Reese. So perhaps in one of his talks with Charles Jones and with Samuel Brown, he says, you know, I've learned about the problem going on in St. John's in Apache County with the children who don't speak English. I think maybe we could have a Tempe Normal School offer classes in Spanish, because Tempe Normal School did not have classes in the Spanish language to be able to teach students, whether they were bilingual or not, whether they were American or not, because by now, students now were coming. Spanish-speaking students were coming now. The children of the families living in San Pablo, the Mexican community of Tempe, right across from Old Main, where we see on College and University, across from Old Main, across from the former setting of the Tempe Normal School, was this Mexican community called San Pablo, which no longer exists, school development. Instead, what do you see in San Pablo on that corner of University and University and Mill? You see the Fulton Center. You see the Mexican Catholic Church, which was originally the Mexican Catholic Church, built by the Catholics of San Pablo. You don't see San Pablo. You see the Veterans Football Stadium, whatever it's called. I can't keep track. The American, whatever, it's Sun Devil Stadium. I still call it Sun Devil Stadium. I still call it the Activity Center. You see all of that area that once was San Pablo, the Mexican community of Tempe. It wasn't a very well-liked community because the Anglos of Tempe did not always respect what was going on there. What was going on there? Gambling, liquor, loose women, children who were not being taken care of. Terrible things were going on in San Pablo. But at night, the white men knew to go to San Pablo. So San Pablo was growing, making demands as well of what was happening in St. John's. The Mexican families of San Pablo throughout Maricopa County were also saying now and making suggestions in their own way to those who were a little bit more prominent. There should be Spanish taught at Tempe Normal School. There was a normal school in the Arizona Territory. It was the Flagstaff Normal School. But it didn't have the bilingualism problem in that area. The University of Arizona was not a normal school. It was not intended to be a teacher training school. That's what the Tempe Normal School became and was and is and continues to be, a teacher training school, an institute to teach children and students as teachers, to become teachers. There was a big need for teachers in Maricopa County. So this idea was fermenting in the minds of Alfredo Reese, of Samuel Brown, of Dr. Charles Jones. By 1900, Charles Trumbull Hayden was gone. He was deceased. He was the one who led what was happening at the Tempe Normal School. His son, Carl Hayden, was the Maricopa County Sheriff. He was interested in the dealings of what was going on at the Tempe Normal School, but he was busy being the Maricopa County Sheriff. He left some important decisions up to Charles Jones, who was appointed as a trustee for Tempe Normal School, Dr. Jones. He was bilingual. He knew what was happening in education. He attended and traveled and represented Tempe Normal School in his role as a trustee appointed by the governor, Governor Oakes, to be in that position for Tempe Normal School, Dr. Jones. So he traveled, He spoke about Tempe Normal. He spoke about the leadership. Early in 1900, Tempe Normal School now had a new president or a new director. We now look at Tempe Normal School and we talk about President Arthur John Matthews. If you're familiar at all with Tempe, Arizona State University, Matthews Library is still there, the original library named after Arthur John Matthews. But Arthur John Matthews is a different kind of public official, a different kind of representative of higher education. He is not a Southerner. If you're familiar with the politics of how Phoenix developed, it developed because the Southerners were already here with their Southern attitudes of racism and discrimination, with their Southern ways of learning how to deal with them. Who were them? Minorities and so forth, which is a different story. But Maricopa County is not Apache County yet. Arthur John Matthews is a friend and a personal friend of Samuel Brown. And of course, with Charles H. Jones. He casually meets Alfred Reese whenever Arthur John Matthews attends Teachers Institutes. He goes to every AEA function in Maricopa County. He goes to every conference, every meeting. He represents the Arizona Territory at NEA, the National Education Association conferences. Dr. Matthews or Mr. Matthews or President Matthews goes to AEA representing the teachers of the Arizona Education Association. He travels, he meets other officials, he meets other educators, he hears new ideas, he learns from others of how they have succeeded in solving their own Mexican problem. And what is the Mexican problem? Language. What is the success to solving this problem? Bilingualism. Dr. Arthur John Matthews hears and learns from Alfredo Reese, from him to Samuel Brown, to Dr. Jones. Demands are now being made by Tempeans to Arthur John Matthews at Tempe Normal. Why aren't classes taught in Spanish at Tempe Normal? We can solve this problem. What are you doing, President Matthews, to help solve the problem? He had no idea yet what to do because there were not classes taught in Spanish because there was no one to teach Spanish. You could go to Flagstaff. Why would you go to Flagstaff if you lived in Maricopa County? You were being trained here as a teacher, but you wanted to become more than a teacher. He wanted you to be more, Dr. Matthews or Mr. Matthews or President Matthews, Arthur John Matthews. Finally, hearing what the three men teach him about the importance of bilingualism, he learns about Grácia Liliana Fernández. He travels to meet her. It isn't clear yet how he met her. I'm assuming that Arthur John Matthews met Grácia perhaps in Tempe, perhaps in St. John's, because she was still in St. John's teaching up until 1905, 1906 maybe. Arthur John Matthews initiates a dual appointment to bring in Grácia Liliana Fernández as the first professor of Spanish, as the first Spanish-speaking Hispana librarian of the Tempe Normal School Library. There have been librarians part-time, secretaries for Matthews, but they weren't really librarians. They were teachers, maybe. They were secretaries to the president, part-time librarians for the library, Tempe School Library. Tempe Tempe Normal School was now growing and developing. Now you had the children of San Pablo coming to attend Tempe Normal School, because Tempe Normal School is also offering high school students to come to Tempe Normal to graduate as high school students from Tempe Normal. But bring in students who are already graduates of high school to come to Tempe Normal and earn a teaching certificate and come away, not diplomas yet, but certificates that gave them legally the position of teacher to teach in the territory of Arizona. So now, little by little, you had more Spanish-speaking Mexican-American students coming to Tempe Normal to become teachers. But because they were already bilingual now, here we have Grácia Liliana Fernández, professor of Spanish, developing on her own the curriculum of Spanish, developing on her own class descriptions so she could teach beginning Spanish, intermediate Spanish, advanced Spanish. And what she made known is, if you're going to take my class, we are going to be speaking Spanish in my class. We're going to be speaking the kind of Spanish you probably speak at home, but we're going to be learning Castilian Spanish. So now you have an added skill in bilingualism added to these teachers who were taking her classes to become bilingual teachers, to find teaching positions in Maricopa County and elsewhere in the territory, because now there was a growing demand for bilingual teachers away from Maricopa County. The mining towns, for example, Globe, Clifton, Morenci, Superior, elsewhere, Jerome, oh my goodness, a demand for bilingual teachers in the mining towns. And where were they coming from? Tempe Normal School, because they were taking classes beginning intermediate, advanced from Miss Grácia Liliana Fernández. Had already developed a curriculum for Tempe Normal, which became very popular, which brought attention to Tempe Normal as a higher educational facility, doing very well, having graduates come away with bilingual skills, English, Spanish, Castilian Spanish. It didn't matter if you were Anglo or not, you were learning Spanish, and you were coming away with a teaching certificate, and you were finding jobs away from Maricopa County. You are now moving up because you didn't have to deal so much with the gender wage. In the mining towns, you were paid equally. Maricopa County was always very different. Male teachers, female teachers, the pregnancy law, blah, blah, blah. So now you have Grácia Liliana Fernández, the very proficient professor, first professor of Spanish. Grácia Liliana Fernández, the teacher who promoted bilingualism. Her legacy is this. Today, in 2025, Arizona State University is still a leader of being able, from 1907 to the present, 118 years maybe, of a facility in higher ed teaching Spanish globally. Arizona State University still offers degrees in Spanish. Arizona State University is still very well known for training teachers. Arizona State University is still very well known for promoting bilingualism because its Spanish department is important globally. Its faculty is well known. They bring in grant money, which pleases Dr. Croat. So we have Grácia Liliana Fernández coming to St. John's in 1900, leaving St. John's in 1906 to come to Tempe Normal to begin teaching in 1907. She stays until 1912. From 1900 to 1912, Grácia Liliana Fernández has already made Spanish important, Spanish legitimate, Spanish as a language to learn, because now you better learn how to speak Spanish. You're going to live on the border, you're going to learn, but now you're going to be able to make money by being bilingual, by being proficient. And you're going to make money by promoting the language because people need that language spoken at home, at work, at school, wherever you are. So Grácia Liliana Fernández made Tempe Normal School famous. Grácia Liliana Fernández stayed at Tempe Normal until 1912. She was there when statehood occurred. So from 1900 to 1912, we have to promote Grácia Liliana Fernández during Women's History Month. We have to acknowledge the things that Grácia Liliana Fernández did. The men were important. The men learned about her. The men helped her. Of course, President Matthews became as famous as Tempe Normal. Oh, he was so proud because now the first professor of Spanish was at Tempe Normal and doing very well. And the students were now becoming bilingual teachers and meeting the demand for bilingual teachers. And there still is a demand for bilingual teachers in our Arizona territory, in our state and elsewhere. You probably hear that. Oh, I should speak Spanish. Oh, I better learn Spanish. Well, what are those kids talking about? I don't know. But there are other reasons for Grácia Liliana Fernández to be the carrier of such a legacy. It's like from here to eternity kind of legacy. Began in 1900 maybe. Began in 1848 with the sheep herders traveling to Concho and St. John's that early up in Apache County, maybe by 1890. But now you have everything happening at Tempe Normal School. TNS, Tempe Normal School. There are still people who talk about what had happened, but no one really promotes that name of Grácia Liliana Fernández, and I am sharing that with you so that you can remember Women's History Month, brag about yourself. It's okay to pat yourself on the back, women, for all the things that you've done to promote whatever you have an interest in, your profession, your career, your children, whatever. Be proud of what you're doing. And not just once a month, but all the time. Women have to be themselves recognized as the women that you are, the women that you became, the women that you promote, the daughters that you're going to help, and so forth. So thank you, Grácia Liliana Fernández.
Wow. A lot to learn out of that. One quick question I would have. Of course, it is Women's History Month, but why do you think it took a woman to make the advances that she did rather than a man? Briefly.
Because she was a woman.
All right, I'll take
He always
that.
tries to stumble me a bit every now and then when we have this kind of a discussion. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I'm still looking for a man's month, but that isn't going to come in this crowd. Anyone, we might have time for one question. Anyone have any questions? Yes.
Elias Ested.
Wait, but whoa.
I
'cause-
want to say this is Dr. Elias Ested, bilingual education teacher of
We need
Spanish
your
at
microphone.
Mason Community College.
Yeah, San Antonio, you're talking about is on the Rio Grande, right?
I'm sorry?
The San Antonio you're talking about is in the Rio Grande, right below Socorro,
Yes.
right? You're not talking about the one in Texas. Okay. Now, St. John was known as San Juan, right? Originally. It was named San Juan. And it changed when the political, in 1898, which we took over the territory, it changed to St. John.
1898 was already promoting the early development of bilingualism through Grácia Liliana Fernández at the University of Maine, where she graduated from. You would not have thought that Spanish as the language would be so important, but we have so many Spanish immigrants coming to Maine in different ways. Her father, for example. So little by little, the Spanish language was already becoming important in Dexter, in Sangerville, at the university campus of Maine, at the high schools, because now at the high schools in Dexter and Sangerville, Spanish was being taught. She was one of the teachers at the high school level in Dexter and in Sangerville. And that was in 1898. So when she came to St. John's on Concho in 1900, Spanish was being spoken, of course, but the teachers were having difficulties, the Anglo teachers, because they did not speak Spanish yet.
In New Mexico,
Use your microphone.
they never stopped speaking Spanish.
No, in New Mexico, they were very bilingual. That's true. So the sheep herder families coming from New Mexico to St. John's on Concho and El Tule and San Antonio were the families who stayed, and they were the same families who were making demands of the public schools to have Spanish-speaking teachers teach their children English.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the political.
I didn't research so much the politics, because I was just looking at the educational issues.
And I think that's for a longer discussion because we're running out of time.
Oh, we have other persons who have questions?
Well, I think, one, you know that this is her passion, and she will stay here following this to answer any questions that you may have. And remember that this program is recorded. We stream it on Facebook, but after that, it is archived, hopefully forever, on YouTube, if you just go to YouTube Tempe History Society. One more round of applause for Dr. Marin. Next month, we move well into the 20th century. How many have lived in or still live in a mid-century home in Tempe? Yeah. That's when Tempe exploded after World War II, and we're really excited to have Scott Soliday come back to the museum. Scott was the curator of history for a number of years, and we'll be talking about the influence that mid-century construction had on the growth and development of Tempe. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Thank again, Friendship Village for their sponsorship and support, and we will see you on April 8th, a week before taxes. Okay. Thank you.